We went a little bit far there, sorry. The language families of America. So I know I said I would not do any more of these videos, but I got a comment with someone asking to do the Americas in one video, and I thought, I suppose it is part of the world, it's 2 out of the 7 continents, so I will go over it. There's not too much to talk about, because the stuff there is to talk about is really, really complicated, and extremely complicated, and then the stuff that isn't extremely complicated is quite straightforward as far as Indo-European languages go, and I've already talked about it, but I will go through and name everything. So let's just go over a brief overview of the actual, the place. So North America is quite linguistically interesting, actually. So of the 579 people that live there, the vast majority speak English, Spanish, or to a lesser extent French. It's mostly English. And then obviously Mexico has about 130 to 140 million people, I believe. So that's a Spanish-speaking country. And then you got the US and Canada. Canada's like 35 million. The US is like 335 million. So that's a lot of English speakers right there. And then there's also various Creoles. We've talked about them in the last video. A Creole is just a blend of 2 languages. So generally it's like a colonial language, like English is probably the chief colonial language. And then like a native language, usually when they're spoken kind of near each other, they blend into one language. So there's a lot of that in the Caribbean, or the Caribbean. I say Caribbean because of the movies. I don't know how you actually meant to say it. If you look on this map here, these orange little islands, that's the Caribbean. I don't know if it's considered an archipelago. I don't think that is, but yeah, that's the Caribbean right there. If you have no idea what a map looks like, some people don't. A lot of people don't actually, so yeah, I'll just point that out, because I do think geography is interesting too. But yeah, anyway, so North America is home to the many language families of its indigenous languages as well. That is kind of where it gets complicated, but we'll get into that later. But those languages have been greatly impacted by European colonization over the last half millennia. So as far as I know, it was I think the Spanish that landed in America in 1492. So that was over 500 years ago, a decent bit over 500 years ago. I don't know before that what Europeans had been to North America. I know Native American peoples had been there, I believe, for over 15,000 years. So there's obviously been people there a long time. As far as Europeans go, at least 500 years they've been there for. So that's a lot of time for extremely powerful nations in Europe to basically impact native populations, and we obviously know what kind of happens when that happens. They start to assimilate their own language and that kind of thing. It's happened in Australia as well. Australia, the Aboriginal peoples of Australia are, I believe, the oldest native community in the world that's ongoing, because they've been there for 40,000 years plus. So obviously not as long in North America, but yeah, it is interesting to see how the impact of European colonization on how languages go. But anyway, South America, on the other hand, slightly not as big population-wise, 422.5 million people, and also many of these factors do impact South America too. Overall, South America, it's debatable which continent retains its native languages more. I guess we'll get into that later. But overall, Spanish is the most commonly spoken language, with Portuguese in a close second, because of Spain and Portugal, obviously, both I don't know. There was definitely immigration. I'm not sure how much colonization happened. I don't know a lot about South American history, but yeah, that's the reason why Portuguese and Spanish are spoken there. And a massive indigenous language is still spoken in South America, actually, given that it's less, I wrote less culturally European than North America. What I meant by that is probably, it's a bit, maybe I didn't think that through. I meant, I guess, less Anglican. Like America and Canada are very similar to like English, like Britain, which is, I guess, not strictly European. I'm going to pretend I didn't write that because I don't know if I thought that through. I got up at 4 to do this, so I was a little bit tired. But yeah, Quechua, Guarani, and Aymara, sorry if I'm not saying this right, are 3 of the most spoken indigenous languages as well. I believe Quechua, or however you, Quechua, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say it, has maybe, is it 7 million speakers? That could be completely wrong, I'm sorry. I just read that when I was researching this video. It has a lot, it's the most spoken. But yeah, overall, just over a billion people live between these 2 continents. Is it a billion? 90, yeah, literally just over a billion. So there's a lot of people between these continents. Let's get into how the actual languages work. So as far as non-indigenous languages go, this is the fairly straightforward part. English, Spanish, and French were brought to the Americas by their respective countries. Portuguese as well. In the Caribbean, Creole languages have formed between colonial languages and West African languages of those enslaved there. So if you know a bit about the history of slavery in regards to the Americas. There's a lot of African transportation to those places. I don't know a lot about them, but as far as Creoles have gone, it is these big languages have kind of merged with African languages, so that would make for some really interesting blends. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into all of them, but yeah, I think that would be interesting to look at given how different those languages are. And if you watch my videos on the language families, you know how different they are truly, because we've unpacked all the differences and how if you've probably seen them and actually been surprised unless you're an expert at how some of the differences, like most people don't know Arabic is written right to left. That's not strictly an African language, it's an Afro-Asiatic language. But yeah, that's just interesting to know. In South America, Portuguese is spoken largely, despite it not being spoken in North America. I don't believe there's any country in North America that speaks Portuguese as an official language. I'm open to being corrected, but I don't believe that's the case. I'm sure it is spoken in places, but yeah, not as an official language. And the reason for that is because Portuguese settlers arrived in the 16th century, and by the 18th century, Portuguese was the official language of Brazil. That is, I'm sure, as probably some common theme with other South American countries, but Brazil was the one that I'm talking about there. Overall, America is the country with the most English speakers as well. So it's an interesting phenomenon where English is obviously to do with England, but England doesn't have the most English speakers. America is the biggest English-speaking country. Obviously, India has a lot of English speakers as well. Not as many as America, but as far as countries that, like, almost the whole country speaks the whole language, America is the biggest English-speaking country, the United States, that is. And Mexico is the same with Spanish, and Brazil is the same with Portuguese. Mexico having 140 million people compared to Spain having, I think, 40 million, and then Brazil having like 200 and something million people compared to Portugal. I'm not sure how much they have, but it's tiny, so presumably way less than that. So it's an interesting phenomenon. I guess you could call it the America pattern, where countries in the Americas speak their language more than the actual original country it came from. But yeah, I just think that's interesting. All non-Indigenous languages are Indo-European as well, with the exception of some immigrant languages. So all the ones we've just talked about, English, Spanish, French, Portuguese, they're all Indo-European languages from Europe, and the only languages that aren't Indigenous, that are also not Indo-European, are like immigrants. So immigrants from China, for example, or potentially Africa, that it's not a Creole, they just speak their own language, are not Indo-European. But they're obviously not, there's not a massive influx of those people. So these are the main ones. As far as Indigenous languages go, there are many still spoken, some largely more than you think, but only hundreds of them are spoken, which might still sound like a lot, but considering 15,000 years and how many people have lived there, the fact that only hundreds are still spoken today and dozens of families is probably not the best, because it's potentially possible that thousands existed. So the reason that thousands of languages can exist in a space where now only a handful are spoken, like officially, is because Indigenous languages or non-colonial languages are generally spoken by kind of small regional communities. It's just more of that seems to be the case just looking at different native groups across the world, rather than big empires all speaking the same language. Obviously big is relative, but generally it's smaller groups or tribes depending on what the native group in question like identifies themselves as. So there can be anywhere from maybe like 50 speakers, really tiny, to thousands, but that's not that much in the grand scheme of things when you consider English has over 1 billion speakers. So a few of those languages were Quechua, Guarani, Aymara, Wayu, and Mapudungun, which are the 5 most spoken in native languages in South America. I believe they might have over 1 million speakers, I think, and then Quechua, I think, does. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have a link in the description for further reading as well, just because it's really complicated. I'm sure this interests some people. It definitely interested one person. So yeah, I'll try and link something in the description. Nahuatl and the Mayan languages, again, I don't know how to pronounce them properly. I'm probably right with Mayan, I hope so. But I could be wrong. I'm definitely wrong with the first one. They're both spoken in Mexico, modern-day Mexico, and they are the only known Indigenous languages with over 1 million speakers, 2 million and 1.5 million respectively. That's in North America, that is. There's also believed to be upwards of 296 languages, I think, in 58 groups in North America. So as far as groups go, there's 30 families. We've talked about language families. They're groups like Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, and there's a bunch more that are smaller, and 28 isolates. What an isolate is a family, but the family only has one language in it, so it's not really genetically connected to anything as far as languages go. Sometimes isolates can be temporary just because we don't know enough about where it evolved from and how it connects, or sometimes I guess they could just have been. I guess they could have been invented. I'm not 100% sure. I always knew that was a thing, but I hadn't really looked into it. So I looked into it a little bit for this video, and it was interesting reading about. But yeah, there are some languages that isolates. Some languages are also isolates by proxy because the other languages in their family have died out. So they do exist, but nobody speaks them anymore. So if you look at, I believe Greek in the Hellenic family is the only Hellenic language currently still spoken. So I guess, I don't know if that's considered isolate because it does have other known languages, but it's de facto an isolate because all of its other related languages are dead, basically. That's just kind of how I see it. That might not be linguistically accurate, but that's just kind of how I see it. South America has 448 languages in 37 families, and it's believed that over 70 of these are unclassified. That's interesting that there are way more languages put into way less family. Actually, sorry. Slightly more families, but less groups, I think. Yeah. And obviously, as I said before, there's too many to list. As far as native languages go, I believe in North America at least, the only country that has a native language as its official language is Greenlandic. Greenlandic is famously hard. But yeah, that's this. If you didn't know what this flag is, this one here, that's the Greenland flag. It is an autonomous territory of Denmark, which is a country in Europe, obviously, but that territory, I believe it has a lot of self-governing power. There's only like 500,000 people that live there, or might even be like 50,000. I can't remember how many zeros are on the number, sorry. But yeah, it's interesting that they still speak Greenlandic. I just wanted to show you some screenshots of something. Obviously, I probably should end this segment. That's basically what we're going to talk about for the Indigenous languages and stuff. I'll have some links in the description if I can find good websites and good reading material for people interested, but just showing you some screenshots of the website I'm working on. This is the screenshot of the gold mine, so if you want to read that, I think it looks pretty good. I've been designing it on my own. The gold mine is basically, you can see the taskbar, the bar at the top where you click on it. It's got all of the resources you need for learning a language. So I'll show you a few more screenshots in the next slide, but basically you can find either the topic you're interested in or pick the language and go through and find resources about it. So with languages, all the links are in order and you can just go through and learn everything. With topics, you can pick your topic and have an explanation. I'm still working on it. It's still under maintenance, so you can't use it properly. But if you want to just have a look at the homepage or have a look around at the design and give me feedback, you're welcome to. That would be great if you could leave a comment about anything you'd recommend for the website, because I'm not a website builder. I'm actually teaching myself this, and it is quite challenging, but I will try and have it done within a few weeks. Here are some screenshots. So you've got there's 4 screenshots, one in each corner. Top left, you've got the languages section of the gold mine, so that's just the very top of it. It's only a screenshot of the page, and then here are a few screenshots of me scrolling down. So you've got, that's what kind of it looks like. It's got the name of the language, and it says, like, hi, are you ready to learn this language in the language, which I think is cool. And I found these pictures of, like, the flags and stuff that I think they're pretty cool design-wise, so I chucked those in. And yeah, you've obviously got Spanish, French, Italian, Mandarin, German, Russian. You can see the top of Korean and Japanese there. I decided to use the South Korean flag over the North Korean flag. Hopefully that's okay with everyone. You've got Hindi, Greek, Swedish, Gaelic, and there's plenty more. That's just all I could fit into like a couple screenshots. I'm not going to screenshot the whole thing. If you want to check it out, link in the description, and you can just have a look through it. I think it looks really artistically cool, but I'm obviously still working on it. And if you have any advice or questions or requests, like, go for it. Leave them in the comment section. Yeah, if you want to. But that's basically it. In the theme of these videos, I've found 2 flags. So the top one is, I guess, a North American flag, and the bottom one was a Caribbean flag. The reason I didn't do a South American flag was because they've already got this flag, some kind of, I can't remember off the top of my head, like a union of South American countries. Sorry, I don't have notes with me when I do this. All my notes are in the PowerPoint, so I kind of just have to remember stuff. But yeah, that's basically it. The Americas are a cultural blend between European languages and retained native languages. Overall, it's an interesting place linguistically, but it has been influenced by much of the world, particularly Europe, and particularly North America has been influenced. So yeah, that's basically it. I've already talked about my website. If you want to check it out, I appreciate it. These videos can be like kind of irritating to make as far as time invested and like inconvenience. So if you could like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it, because I do actually really enjoy making them. But yeah, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something.